Hey guys, we're back. Sorry, it's been a while. There's been lots of things going on in our lives. It's kind of hard to get on here when you're working three jobs and taking care of kids. And what are you doing?
I make chocolates now on the side of mom life. So
So life's a
it's
little
busy.
busy. I don't know if I told you guys I went to school for HVAC, so I've been doing that. I still work full time for the main company I've been working for. Do that on the side. Work for an apartment complex doing maintenance. So life's a little busy, and then you throw kids into the mix. Start of school, summertime. You all probably get it. We can make 1,000 excuses of why we haven't been on here, but we are going to try to do better. We're not going to make promises we can't keep anymore because obviously we're not very good at it. We do want you guys to know we do see your comments. We read them. We try to answer them when we're on here. If you do have personal questions, you're welcome to put that, and we'll reach out to you. Is that it? Did I cover it all? Of what we've missed?
Yeah,
And what's new and exciting in our lives?
I think so.
Um, so today we kind of want to introduce some of the medical issues I've had as I've progressed in life, as I've grown up, which I still haven't done. Um, so let's start when I was little, and I told you guys that it was first Noonan syndrome was first characterized as Turner syndrome, and if you know what Turner syndrome is, it's where you're born with both boys and girls parts, and the reason why this is going to be a little graphic, and I'm going to use some terms and medical stuff that might be a little bit like, oh wow. Um, at the beginning, they couldn't find my testicles. They didn't know where they were. They noticed they weren't there, stuff like that. Well, they realized I had a hernia. So I was super young when they realized that. I was still a baby. They did a hernia surgery, brought down my testicles, pinned them into place, everything like that. Made sure it wouldn't happen again. That was kind of the first big thing I had. From there, we went on to bunch of testing, lots and lots of testing. My health wasn't the greatest, and neither were my reflexes. I had lots of times I had stitches and stuff like that. I dealt with lots of ear infections, had tubes, had that kind of stuff. Should have had my tonsils taken out. Didn't have my tonsils taken out until I was older, until I was above my 20s, which wasn't as bad as everybody thought it would be. Surgeries when I was little, I think that pretty well covers that as we progressed in life.
If you want more details on Little Bridger and maybe his medical stuff, we are hopefully in the next couple videos going to have his mom join us. And we're going to break her down into probably 2 or 3 little episodes for you guys so she can explain him growing up and her pregnancy with him and stuff like that. So if you have more questions for her about him when he was little and growing up and the things that she dealt with as his mom and the things she saw as his mom, feel free to pop those down in the comments and I will make sure that we have a list for her to answer for you guys when she's on our next whatever video we have her on.
And I know we've promised to have her on. She would have been on this one. She had some medical stuff come up, so she wasn't feeling very good. So she will come in eventually. So let's talk about, we talked about that I was on pain management and stuff like that. When I started having some real surgeries in my life is when I was older. That's when some of the other stuff reared its ugly head, such as I needed my tonsils taken out. I got that done in 2011, I want to say. I had my wisdom taken out when I was in high school. No big deal. Everybody does that. But I had my tonsils, my adenoids, and I had a deviated septum and no septum. So I had a lovely surgery where they went in and they did that, and they roto-rooted my nose and all kinds of other stuff. That one was interesting. It wasn't terrible. What actually got me was when they took the splint out that they stick up your nose, they stitch right through the center, and when they ripped that stitch out, it tore that center tissue. I have a 1 centimeter tear now, so it whistles. But that one was an interesting experience. The tonsils, 2 weeks, I was great. Got over it really quick. I think that was probably because I dealt with so much pain in my life at that point that I was just able to get over it quickly. Continue on, and I was hit by a semi. I have to be careful with what I state in this one because of what happened. I was hit by a semi, and when they did, they rear-ended my little sports car, brought me forward, crushed my one vertebrae. So I dealt with back pain there, and that added on top of the arthritis I was already dealing with. They did a procedure where they go in and burn out the nerves. That one was fun. That one was not a fun situation. After that one took about 4 months to heal. They said I was too young, and with my Noonan syndrome being involved, they wanted it to heal on its own. So that's another thing that comes into play of all these surgeries and injuries is having Noonan syndrome. Our bone structure is different, so treatment ends up being different. Going to different doctors and different specialists end up being different. As time continued, in about 2015, I started not feeling the greatest. I started just feeling really yucky. Like, I don't even know how to describe it. Just felt really ran down, not feeling great. Fast forward 3 years, 2018, I started getting a pain on my right side up at the top, and I felt like I was gonna die. Legitimately felt like I was gonna die. And I went to the ER many times, met with doctors many times, and they kept telling me, oh, your gallbladder's bad, you just got sludge in it, it's gotta come out. It's gotta come out. So we went on. I finally met with the general surgeon, had all kinds of x-rays and CAT scans and everything else, and they said, actually, it's not. What it is was my insides were backwards. So all my colon, my appendix were on the left.
Everything but his heart.
Everything but my heart was on the wrong side. So everything ran down the left side, not the right side. My appendix were on my left side, everything like that. And what it had done is as my organs had tried to flow to where the blood supply feeds from, which is the right side, where your heart expects it to go, my organs tried to pull back that way. And as they did, they would create like a scar tissue band, which were restricting all my intestines. And the other thing that happened was it took all my organs and knotted them up and wrapped them around the main blood supply. The blood supply you have looks like kind of like a netting. I don't know the whole biology. I'm not going to try to go into it and act like I'm a doctor or anything. But this is what they told me was it wrapped around the main blood supply. So what they did was they went in 2018 and they cut me from the bottom of my sternum clear below my belly button, laid me open, pulled everything out, and rearranged it and put it back in there. The doctor told me, I put you back in an organized manner, not in the way it was supposed to be, but in a way we hope it doesn't happen again. There is a possibility it's going to happen again, but hopefully it holds. So he stitched me up, sent me on my way. About a month of agony of having your insides cut open like that and handled is not fun. It was pretty invasive. As time continued and I healed from that, I still didn't feel 100%. I still kind of felt yucky inside, just got sick on random stuff, didn't feel great. Fast forward, I get married in 2020 during COVID. We got married March of 2020, and the weekend after we got married, they closed everything down because of lovely COVID, if you remember. A year went by, and I still didn't feel good, and I started to get that same pain I got up at the top.
It wasn't a year.
It was.
You had your next surgery.
It was in March. We were right at a year when I had that surgery.
No, you had it right before. Sorry about that. Trying to figure out our timing. Yeah. It's been a minute.
It's been a minute. But it was close to a year, not quite. So they went back in and they redid the surgery again. And they cut me clear open, pulled everything out, laid it to the side, redid the surgery. We went with the same surgeon that did it in 2018.
But I'm just going to pipe in here because I told him he needed a second opinion. And hubby did not listen.
I did not listen. And so the organs were knotted up and they did need adjusted and everything. Yes. And that did happen. And I thought, oh, this doctor saved my life. We're going to use him again. He's going to do great. Time went on. About a week after the surgery, I got super, super sick. It was actually on our anniversary. My wife had to take me into the ER and I spent 5 days in the hospital again, trying to get my nausea and just feeling just gross afterwards back under control. Some time went on. 4 months later, in July, so that was March. July, I still didn't feel good. Decided I needed to listen to my wife and get a second opinion. And we met with the new surgeon. And I knew the surgeon from previous stuff. My wife went to school with his kids, so we knew this guy. We had some faith that he would lead us in the right direction. And he looked at me, looked over my chart, everything else, and said, I think your gallbladder's bad. The gallbladder should have come out, which it didn't in 2018. He said all my sickness and everything else was because my insides were knotted up. And he said it the same thing the second time. Gallbladder gets bad rep, da-da-da-da-da, we're not going to take gallbladder. Well, this surgeon said, it's your gallbladder's bad, let's do some testing. We did some testing, all kinds of different stuff. No gallstones ever showed up. And he said, your insurance will only let me take it if you have gallstones. Nothing showed up. One day I came home from work, and I don't really remember driving home, and I don't really remember walking in, but I remember my wife looking at me going, there's something wrong, we're going to the ER.
Well, and it wasn't just me that said it. We were living with my parents at the time, and my mom looked at me and looked at him and looked back at me and said, I'll keep your kid, you need to take him to the ER. So off we went.
So we went to the ER, and what we found out was I actually had one gallstone. One. And they tried to blame it on my medication and everything else and say, oh, it's his medications causing all this, and he has pancreatitis, but it's from his medication, and yada, yada, yada. So we called the surgeon. The surgeon said, no, you got one gallstone, I'm taking that gallbladder. The gallbladder's coming out.
Well, and he was going to fix a small hernia.
Yeah, and I had hernia on the previous cut.
Just a small one.
At the top.
And so he was going to try and fix that.
So he went in and got in there, got the gallbladder out, stitched up the hernia and sent me, and then came out and said that gallbladder was bad. What it had done was it had kept pumping all the gallstones instantly into my pancreas, and I kept going in and out of pancreatitis for the last few years, and that's why I felt so terrible. So all of a sudden, now I felt good. A few more months go by, and all of a sudden, my abdomen starts looking like I'm pregnant. And we do have pictures of these.
We do have pictures.
We have pictures of the scars, the stitches, all of that. I'm not going to show it on the YouTube channel. If you'd like to see what it looks like, I'm happy to show them. But what happened was where he had cut me originally in 2018, he should have put a piece of mesh in. The doctor didn't. And all that from being stitched up, scar tissue doesn't heal against each other. And I herniated. So all my insides were at that point poking out.
And he looked like he looked pregnant. He looked probably 7 months pregnant.
So all my intestines were coming through my abdomen wall. So I met with that surgeon again that did the gallbladder, and he said, we need to go back in and fix this, and I need to put a piece of mesh in. And I need to readjust all your insides again and kind of stitch stuff down and get it to really hold. So after some talking and some really discouragement in my life of this will be the third surgery for this year, fourth time on my abdomen in the last 5 years, we agreed. And he went in, he did the surgery, he put a piece of mesh in. He said I'd been herniated so long it took several of his nurses to help pull the muscle back in place and get it to stitch right. He also stitched everything down and made sure it was done right. Stitched me up, took me to my recovery room. No big deal. That night I had some issues. I was actually standing up and going to the bathroom, and all of a sudden I puked up blood. I had a drain, it filled with blood, and I just started to decline. I don't remember a lot after that.
Would you like me to take a
I remember that them coming in and telling me that my blood pressure was tanking and my heart rate was skyrocketing, and I don't remember much after that. I'll have my wife tell you because she had to sign the paperwork and everything. I was so far gone.
So that night after that first surgery, I knew something was wrong, especially after he had, I'm sorry if this is like TMI for you, especially after he had vomited. And he tried to make it be all like, oh, I just ate red Jell-O, that's all it was. And I'm going, no, honey, it was
too dark.
It was too dark. And so I would stay the nights, come in the afternoon, because our oldest daughter was in kindergarten at the time, and she was in afternoon kindergarten because I was working in the afternoons. And so it just made sense at that point to put her in afternoon kindergarten. So I would come in the afternoons and stay the nights and go home in the morning. So that morning, my alarm went off. I knew his sister was coming to take over shifts, and this was at the time, Rona was still raging, and so you had to have an arm bracelet to get in and out of the hospital. And so I would always go get my arm bracelet for the day, and then I'd leave and come back. So I got home and he called me and he was super out of it. The nurse was like 45 minutes late on his pain meds, and that wasn't supposed to happen.
And when you have a surgery like that, you got to be on your pain meds. They were doing nausea medication. Another thing that we forgot to mention is Noonan syndrome kids have a bleeding disorder, so you don't clot right. So they were on top of my bleeding disorder, giving me medications they were actually sticking shots in my abdomen after that, which, if you can imagine, is not the most comfortable situation. But they were late on that too, which was really, really scary because they can't be late on that kind of stuff when you have a bleeding disorder.
So at this point, I could kind of tell he was even more out of it, and I was like, okay, I'm not going to worry. His sister's going to be there soon, and then I'll be able to get updated. Well, long story short, while I was away, I was not updated properly. And so I didn't really know what's going on other than kind of what he told you. So I dropped our daughter, off to school a little earlier than normal with the kids that got off the bus, and she went and she played. And I got to the hospital and I walked into the front desk and I was like, what the heck is going on with my husband? And they're like, oh, ma'am, you needed to calm down. And I was like, no. What the heck is going on with my husband? Well, who's your husband? So I tell him who he is. Oh, yeah, he's kind of a high priority patient. Well, we're not really sure what's going on. And so at this point, I was fuming. I was super mad. I go to his room, and his surgeon is in the hallway checking on patients, and getting ready to read a scan that he was going in for, just to double check everything that was going on. And he kind of caught me in the hall and made sure I was okay. Well, I walked in and I looked at him, and he looked like he was dead. I'm going to be honest with you.
I don't remember.
He had no color. He was super incoherent. And that was not normal for him after surgery, even something as invasive as what had happened. The previous surgery, he didn't look like that.
And that was even with the surgeon that made massive mistakes. I was still coherent and everything else.
Right. So I just said, I'm never leaving you alone again. His mom at this point is in the room. They took him for his scan, and he came back, and maybe not even 5 minutes later, the surgeon came in. And this is happening in a matter of probably an hour since I've gotten back to the hospital. He comes in and he said, I don't want to tell you this, but you have some internal bleeding, and you have two options. You can either let it heal on its own, because it will, but you'll just be miserable until then, or I can go back in and fix it. And he's so out of it, and all he says is, I thought the kid's bedroom door was open. That's the bathroom door. Oh my goodness. He says, well, I don't really know what to do. I need to talk to my wife. So the surgeon and his mom step out of the room, and I'm just like, you don't really have a choice. And he at this point was, again, still so out of it that he was just like, okay, whatever.
Well, the surgeon also hoped it would heal. He didn't say it would for sure, but he said, I hope it heals. So the surgeon comes back in, and we're like, we're going to go forward with the surgery. We don't have we'd rather be safe than sorry. So he goes, okay, it's probably going to be 2 or 3 hours, and then we'll have surgery. So my mother-in-law's like, I have a hair appointment. Am I cool to leave? I'm like, yeah, sure, that's fine. So she leaves to go have her hair done, and like maybe 5 minutes after she leaves, in comes the surgeon with the paperwork, and he's like, well, I need you to sign it because he's too out of it. He can't sign it. So I think he handed me the pen, and I looked at him like, what do you want me to do with this?
He handed him the pen, and he couldn't sign it. So I signed the paperwork for the surgeon and for the anesthesiologist, and I called my mother-in-law back, and I said, they're taking you back to surgery right now, like we're walking to pre-op. And so she's like, well, do you want me to come back? I'm like, no, I'll be fine. I'll just go get something to eat. And if you want to send, his dad over to, sit with me, or his sister, whatever, that's cool too. So into surgery he goes, and I go get food. And then this surgery lasted probably a good 6.5, almost 7 hours. Surgeon comes out, says, I fixed it. And then I stood there for 45 minutes poking and prodding to make sure he didn't bleed again. But I want you to know that I wasn't happy with how I performed the surgery the first time. So this gave me an opportunity to go in and put the mesh in the way that I wanted to put it in. And I was like, okay. So he came back to his room, and the next evening after that surgery is when he finally started to become Bridger again. And he sat up and we watched shows together, and we'd he finally was able to eat and he had his appetite back and he didn't look like he was dying. But from the wife's perspective, it was really scary. And I'm sure it was really scary for his parents too. But that was the first major Noonan syndrome thing I had ever had to go through with him. And it was really, really scary. And I'm really happy that he's alive and still with me. And the fun thing is I was maybe a month pregnant with our youngest daughter the whole time this was going on.
Well, and I remember thinking before I went in, I have a family. I have to do this. I have to do this surgery to save my family so I can support them and do all these things. And lo and behold, because of the Noonan syndrome, I had a bleeder. Like we said before, Noonan syndrome kids have a bleeding disorder. And it came and reared its ugly head in that moment. And the first time, it's not like my surgeon did anything wrong. He did it to book. He did it 100% to book. But when he walked away, he knew he needed to do something different in it for my case. And that was really special to us, to have a surgeon say, I should have looked at the case better and done this better for you, and let me do that now. And he's a phenomenal surgeon, and we think the world of him. And he saved my life, and there's other stuff there that goes behind it, religiously wise, that we're not going to go a lot into, but those are kind of an intro. That's kind of an in-depth of what my health has been like and the kind of surgeries I've been through. And there are things to watch for your kids, like the bleeding disorder, the, bad tonsils, bad sinuses, bad ears. I mean, I had tubes put in my ears 2 years ago. They just fell out, so I got to go back in and do it. And they do it right there in the office. They'll cut an adult open and slide the tube in. But that's part of having my sinuses. Because my ears sit lower, the drain tube is a little different and stuff like that. The bleeding disorder, having to do the surgery twice, on the third time, randomly having to do it again. I mean, what are the odds, That's the joys of having Noonan syndrome and fighting those things and the things to watch.
There is a medical
term
name or terminology for why his insides were the way they were. Our pediatrician, we were telling him about it, and he's going, it's called this. I can't remember what it is.
Because we're having him watch it in our kids to make sure they don't have that.
He explained the reason why they knotted up and did what they did, his intestine stuff, was because basically he worded it as if his heart had been on the opposite side, they wouldn't have done that.
I'd have been fine.
Because your insides want to align with where your heart is at, and that's why his do that. Or did that the few times it did.
And so that's kind of like the heavy, in-depth stuff of my medical life. We hope you guys enjoy this video. If you guys have any questions, please feel free to ask. We do want to do a Q&A coming up.
They can be questions to get to know us better. They can be questions about Noonan syndrome. They can be questions for his mom. She has always said she loves to educate people. So if you have questions specifically for her, put them down in the comments.
In her words, she likes to talk about the wiggle in my chromosome, as we told you at the beginning.
Why our channel is called Wiggle in My Chromosome.
Yeah.
So
if you want to know how we met, anything like that, we can tell you. That story's really interesting too. It's kind of one of those things that just worked out the way it was supposed to. The biggest thing I learned, that even though your wife may not have seen you grow up and know Noonan syndrome, she cares about you enough, or your significant other cares about you enough, you need to take their counsel into consideration too. Because it no longer just affects you and your parent, it affects your spouse, and it affects that loved one. Listen to them and follow their guidance, because sometimes they can have an outsider input that would change the situation 100%. I wouldn't have had to have that surgery 3 times. I probably would only had to have it twice had I listened in the beginning. And I probably wouldn't have had to have the gallbladder taken out. It would have been taken out the first time in March. But we don't listen sometimes, and we're stubborn-headed, and it happens. It's, part of growing up. We hope you guys have a good evening. Thank you for watching our YouTube channel. And we do appreciate all the support and all the questions. And are you guys still on here? We are. We're still here. Again, we apologize. We've been crazy busy, and that's not an excuse. We are going to do better.
But just look forward to having his mom come on. Like we said, if you have questions for her, us, get to know us better, whatever your question is, pop it down below. I'll write it down, and we will do a Q&A with you.
We do also, my brother is a nurse practitioner. So on a medical standpoint, if you do want to hear questions from him, I think maybe that's part of the reason why he went into the medical field was because of me. I know he's written papers on Noonan syndrome and stuff like that. So if you do want a medical insider's input, we could always have him on too. So just let us know. Whatever you guys want, we will happily do. Have a good one.